Doctor, welcome into another week of Dropping Dimes. I am your host, Matt Nost. I am rolling solo today, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I want to talk about the race for the eighth seed in the West. It it is fantastic. It is utterly fantastic. Teams, you can really feel the sense of urgency, that every possession matters, and there's a full-on battle royale night in, night out from these four teams. Now, others within this context, your Pelicans and your Kings, they're done. They have no chance. And at this point, they've got to do some sort of searching as to what the future of those teams hold. It's got to be just a bitter pill to swallow, knowing that, say, the Kings easily could have drafted Luka, and they would be in a much different situation right now had they done that. You pair him with Buddy Fox, or pardon me, De'Aaron Fox, and then you have Buddy Hield coming in off the bench or something, or you have a three-man lineup with those guys. Just like we'd be talking about them potentially where Dallas is right now, in that seventh spot and securely held within the bosom of the playoffs. But no, the Kings are out and the Pelicans are going to be out. Now, the Pelicans have what appears to be a bright future. They've got a young core of guys. Brandon Ingram's an all-star and could be a perennial all-star. Zion, if he can stay healthy, is a franchise transitional piece. And Lonzo has been up and down, mostly down in this bubble. But who knows, another year with these guys, like when him and Zion are playing together, they have a real connection between the two of them. Just like when you watch Jokic and Michael Porter Jr., they have a connection between the two of them, and it's fantastic to watch. But so the race for the eighth seed and ninth seed, that playoff game into the playoffs, it's between four teams. Right now, Portland is in the driver's seat. And then just below them is Memphis, Phoenix, and San Antonio. All three are tied for that ninth position. And I'd like to start off by talking about the red hot Phoenix Suns. Phoenix has rattled off 7 straight wins. I looked it up when on Basketball Reference. It's their longest win streak since 2009-2010, the 09-10 season, which they had a 10-game win streak there. And that was in the tail end of the Nash era. I believe they made the Western Conference Finals that year and lost to the Lakers 4-2. And it's been a decade since they've managed to rattle off all these wins. Now, the context of the wins thus far, all right, here's who they've played. Their first game was against Washington. That's a gimme. Washington is rolling out basically a glorified G League team. Rui Hachimura is their best player. And then after that, it's trying to get run from all these other guys and see, which of these pieces can fold in nicely with Beal and John Wall and potentially Bertans. Let's see where he goes and at what cost. I don't know that Washington will be able to afford him, but we'll see. We'll see. But Phoenix takes them down 125-112 in the first game. Not surprising. The Wizards should not have been invited, although it's good for their young guys, and the league is talking about once certain teams exit, they'll be bringing in, potentially, they've talked about bringing in the other teams that didn't make it into the bubble. That way there's a safe environment for these teams to get some practice and to basically have a small camp type of thing instead of being away and being forced to just kind of use the facilities, one at a time, or however their locality deems it, prudent. So they beat the Wizards. Phoenix beat the Wizards on the first one. Not that big a deal. And the next game, they beat the Mavs 117-115. Now, the Mavs had all their starters, and they got good games from Doncic and Porzingis. And Phoenix still won. Close win, but a win is a win is a win. So they got a 2-point W there. That's a legitimate win. The next game against Clippers, same score, 117-115. Clippers had everybody except Montrezl Harrell, and Phoenix wins that game. And they got a pretty damn good game from Kawhi and a so-so game from Paul George. But still, this is a team that I think could not easily, but that could win the championship. They're deep enough. They have enough roster flexibility to pretty much take on anybody. I mean, size on the interior is probably the Clippers' biggest Achilles heel. That being said, they can make up for it with shooting and wing defense. So the Clippers, are within the content, the discussion, so to speak, of top 3-4 teams that have a legitimate shot of winning it this year, so long as everybody stays healthy. And Phoenix beat them 117-115. That's a solid win. Game after that against the Pacers. The red hot Pacers, the red hot TJ Warren up until this point, and this is the first time TJ Warren had a mediocre game in the bubble. And I think it's either 12 or 16 points in that game. Just played like the TJ Warren that had played for Phoenix previously. And they whooped the Pacers 114-99. And they also got double doubles out of Booker and Ayton. Like solid games all around. Quality win right there. Next game after that is against the Heat, 119-112. Now, the Heat didn't have Jimmy Butler, and also as a team, they shot 30% from three, which is very un-Heat-like. So do you attribute that to cold day shooting and no Jimmy, or increased defensive prowess from the Suns on that 119-112 win? I don't know, but either way, you play the team in front of you, and that's still a fairly deep team. You have an all-star in Bam, and that trio of young rookies who are all pretty fantastic in Nunn, Harrow, and Duncan Robinson. So another win. Then they take on OKC, and they destroy OKC 128-101. Now, OKC had no Shai Gilgeous, no Schroeder, and no Steven Adams. Once again, you're just playing the team in front of you. You beat them. You still had they still had Chris Paul. So it's not like they were completely without any of their main guys. But at the same time, they're not going against an OKC team at full strength. But they beat them, and they beat them handily by 27 points. That is an ass whooping. And then finally, yesterday's game, which they beat a team with no Embiid, no Simmons, no Tobias Harris, no Al Horford. Their four biggest pieces on this Sixers team. And in that first quarter, if you watch the game, they were getting outperformed. Mike Scott looked like an all-star. So watching it, you're like, okay, is this where it slips away? They didn't come in taking this game seriously because they knew all these guys were going to be out. And perhaps this full head of steam that they had was beginning to peter out. And then they turned that around. They ultimately win the game 130-117. But they have rattled off 7 straight wins. And as numerous people have pointed out, and one did, to me on Twitter, they can win all these games, Phoenix can, and still not make it in to the playoffs, which is crazy talk. So what has been the difference for Phoenix? If you look at the stats, so you can go pre-bubble versus bubble. Now, their offensive rating in pre-bubble was 110 points per game. In the bubble, it's 118. So they're scoring 8 more points. It's 110.2 to 118.7. So 10.5 points. That is a massive difference. And the other side is the defensive rating, 111.3 versus 107.5. Now, in the context of that, Ayton hasn't played full complement of games, and he gives them some defensive presence on the interior, but he's also got a tremendous number of defensive lapses. If you watch, there's 1 to 2 plays a game where he just watches an offensive player on the other team blow past his teammate, and instead of shifting over to contest at the rim, he just stands there, say at the free throw line, when he easily could have shuffled over 3-4 feet and made a contest. And he doesn't. He just stays kind of stationary. He does that a couple times a game where if I was a Suns fan, I would be supremely frustrated. But as he gets more and more and more, game time and reps within the context of the offense and the defensive scheme, and the more playing time he has, hopefully he rounds into being a solid defensive center within the league. But I think on the defensive rating, it's really Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson being inserted into that starting lineup. I mean, Mikal Bridges gives them length and defense plus 3-point shooting that they sorely lack and need on a consistent level. And all of this has been done in the absence of Kelly Oubre, who is their second leading scorer, I think at 18.7 points per game, just a tenth of a point above DeAndre Ayton at 18.6. So is that the difference? Is it getting Cam Johnson, a rookie, a 23-year-old rookie, but a rookie nonetheless, into the starting lineup alongside Mikal Bridges, which gives them a little bit more defense, and with the extra spacing of Mikal shooting more threes and whatnot, and putting the ball in Booker's hands a little bit more, because that's the other interesting thing about this. In the bubble, their assist ratio is actually down. Their effective field goal percentage is up. Their true shooting percentage is up. So is pulling Kelly Oubre Jr. the catalyst to both sides of the ball? It gets them closer to being what they, in fact, actually are long term. Now, they've also, fortuitously gotten some good 3-point shooting from Ricky Rubio. DeAndre Ayton has shot and hit a couple threes, I believe. So that hasn't been exactly consistent through the regular season. And a lot of people attribute this to the jump for Booker. That's the big, tremendous change for the overall complexion of the Suns. And if you look at his stats, they're roughly the same as they were pre-bubble. So I don't know that you can fully attribute it to Booker. It's got to be nice, though, for the other teammates to know that they have someone of that caliber and quality to rely on at all times. But it's not like he went from, 22 to 24 points a game. Now he's averaging 30 to 32 points, and it's been this huge jump, and you can attribute the massive offensive rating leap to his increased production on the offensive end. So I'm not saying that Booker isn't part of the reason that they have rattled off now 7 straight wins. You have to give a lot of that credit to him. I mean, look at that last second shot against the Clippers, the turnaround when PG was right in his face, but Kawhi was there too. And he does a little shimmy fadeaway, and just right in PG's eye. And technically, PG wanted a foul against the Lakers in that opening game where he got nudged by LeBron. I believe, if memory serves off the top of my head, he hit Booker on his shooting while he was shooting on his offhand, but still, that's part of the shot. So you could call an offensive foul there. I could be wrong on that, but I remember seeing it and then seeing the replay in time. And it's like, PG, see, it goes both ways. You didn't get the call there, but you also didn't get the call against you. It's late game heroics. Outside of against Dallas last night, where it's pretty flagrant when Trey Burke just kind of ran over Damian Lillard, you're not going to get that call, especially when, it's a PG versus LeBron or PG versus Devin Booker, as opposed to a Trey Burke versus Damian Lillard. Stars are going to get the calls more often than not in the NBA. That is a fact. That is something we have all known for the duration of our NBA viewing lives. So is it just taking Oubre out of the equation? I can't pinpoint anything else. Is it that he's too selfish a player, that he likes to have the ball in his hands, so it stops the offense overall and it reduces the flow and the ball movement? I don't know. I mean, I've never been a big Oubre fan. He's always had the potential, but I'm not entirely sure that he's come to fruition. he's always had a chip on his shoulder, and I could never exactly tell why. Perhaps it was he felt he was should have been higher, should have been a bigger prospect. But he's irked me in the same way that Dion Waiters has. There's a huge ego there, and I've never seen all that much to back up the ego. But I could be wrong. I mean, Suns fans, let me know. Perhaps you're missing Oubre, but it's not, the evidence doesn't bear that out on 7 straight wins. So I don't know. We've had a couple comments so far, and as I put out in the tweet, I will, bring up the comments as they come in. This is from Eric Ritz. Didn't get to catch the Bucks game last night. Thoughts on the Giannis ejection? I'm a big Bucks fan. I think it's good for Giannis to get a bit chippy. Don't want to get pushed around or thought of as soft. Well, I don't watch college basketball anymore. It's too frustrating for me to watch. I really, when you see it, like when I watched one game of Ja Morant, it was in the tournament, and because I had heard the hype of this dude is a lottery draft pick, and I wanted to see him. I wanted to see, because sometimes you hear that hype about players, and then you watch it and you're like, yeah, I see what they could be or how they could potentially fit in an NBA offense. And saw Ja, and you're like, yeah, no, this dude is ready to make the jump. So my point on this is Mo Wagner or Wagner, potentially, however you want to pronounce it. But Mo Wagner, all I saw on Twitter last night is, if you're not a Michigan fan, no Big Ten fan liked him. And I've watched a lot of Big Ten basketball. Those guys do exist. The hustle players that you love to have on your team. It's the same thing with Joakim Noah. I couldn't stand him on Florida, and when my Bulls drafted him, I understood why the fan base there was so loyal. So I think Giannis was sick of Mo doing apparently Mo-like things. And I have to confess, I've only watched a handful of Wizards games this year, and it was mainly just to watch Beal and Hachimura and Bertans. So I don't know that much about Mo Wagner, or Wagner, or however in the world you pronounce it. I keep wanting to say Wagner, Mo Wagner. But by all accounts, he's a punk. And more than likely, he had this coming from somewhere. Is it an ejection? Yes. In today's NBA, that is an ejection. If this were 25 years ago, we'd probably just get a foul. And nothing more would have come of it. But yes, it is. And what'll be interesting about that is, so Giannis, I believe, has a suspension for the next game, and that's when Memphis plays them. And that changes the dynamic. Now, Giannis was never going to get a ton of run in that game, in my assumption, because they've got the number one locked up and probably play like Budenholzer's done other times, 15 or so minutes a game, maybe 18, but just to keep his legs kind of, and his conditioning in tune with the playoff run that is going to come. But there's no point in doing what the Lakers seem to be doing with LeBron still playing him a lot of minutes. And the rationale that I've heard there is because he's 35 and he had a 4-month break, even if he puts in all the time that he does and all the conditioning and the money that he invests in his body, it's still a difference of a 35-year-old needing to get up to playoff speed as opposed to a 25-year-old who can kind of flip that switch a little bit quicker. So perhaps that's why, LeBron is still playing relatively heavy minutes this late within the bubble, but we'll see going forward. And I also liked it too. Why not? It's a good throwback to the way the NBA used to be. And our next one is from Suava. It says, Booker is no surprise, but the rest of the team stepping up, especially Ayton, is nothing less than shocking. Yeah. With no Oubre and no Aaron Baines, because Baines also opens up, you'll have a big that can shoot threes, and that just frees up driving lanes for Booker and for Rubio to draw defenders in and do a kick out. And if Baines can shoot threes, that also draws the rim production of the opposing team out to the 3-point line unless they run a switch. So he unlocks, quite a bit for them. And it is surprising to watch. They play with a confidence that I haven't seen by and large from Phoenix. Now I watched more Phoenix games this year than I did of the Wizards, but at a certain point, once they became the Suns again, just like, unless the matchup is super intriguing, I don't know that I'll tune into something else on that night. But it's crazy to watch. The only thing I can come up with is that it's Oubre. Oubre is the difference in this. Yes, it'd be nice to have Aaron Baines back, but Oubre, your second leading scorer, taking him out, you would think that would, just equal doom for Phoenix, and they have thrived. They have thrived to a degree that it almost makes you think perhaps they need to shop for some sort of package and get Oubre out of here to just make sure that they've opened up all that playing time for Bridges and Cam Johnson. Because Oubre, if they make the playoffs, Oubre will be back for the opening round, is all I've heard thus far. But do you mess up that chemistry? They're playing really excellent, fluid, and dynamic basketball right now. So I don't know. Now, their main competition coming in are the Portland Trailblazers, who last night, Dame went full Dame time, 61 points, just firing from everywhere on the floor. And what makes them potentially lethal is, in the past, if this was last year's team or 2 years ago's team, so Dame goes for 61, but CJ had a bad game, especially by CJ's standards. But by average NBA, if you're going to shoot that many shots, he did not have a good game. But they have Carmelo there as well. And Carmelo dropped in 26 points, efficient shooting. He was clutch when they needed him, hit I want to say 2 threes late in the game, one for sure, with like 2.5 minutes left, just to keep the momentum, because the back and forth, it was 1-3, and then the other team comes down and answers with a 3, and then they get a layup and a little mid-range down on the other end of the court. It was a back and forth, a really engaging game. But to have Melo there, and Gary Trent Jr. has finally cooled down from 3 points. He's gone 1 for 6 the past 2 games. Because before this, in the previous 5, he was arguably the best 3-point shooter in the bubble, which he's not a bad 3-point shooter, but to become the best, it's really impressive. And a lot of guys were saying it was the bubble, that court atmosphere could really help certain shooters, because without a crowd behind it, your depth perception may not be skewed as much. And it seems to have benefited certain shooters. I think the greatest evidence to the effect of the bubble on shooting is at the free throw line. Free throw percentage is up something like 3%, 4%, something along those lines, across the board for all teams. I'm sure there are some that are roughly right around where they are, and others that are even higher, thereby averaging out that, roughly 3%. But free throw shooting in the bubble has gone up because you don't have the fans distracting. You have a better sense of depth perception without all the crazy noise. Perhaps it allows guys to just relax and focus on their shooting motion as opposed to trying to tune out the white noise of the crowd. So Gary Trent Jr. has just come back to earth a little bit. We'll see in this next game how he rebounds. But Portland, watching that game, you're like, oh, man, they have really fought to get here. And I am pulling for them in the opening round to make the 8th seed, because I think that they would make the most compelling matchup against the Lakers. The Lakers want anybody but Portland. Anybody. Doesn't matter that Phoenix is hot. Now you got to play the Lakers in the playoffs. And let's see if all these young guys can actually do it, because Rubio is the old guard and everybody else is young. So can these young guys really pull it together in the playoffs for Phoenix? For Memphis, you have no Jaren Jackson Jr., so it's Ja Morant and Dillon Brooks just having the green light to shoot as much as Dillon Brooks apparently wants to shoot. Doesn't matter how efficient he's doing it. And you need someone to take the shots, but damn it, man, there are certain points where you're double and triple teamed and you're jacking up a three. And it's tough to watch. If I was a Memphis fan, it would be frustrating as all hell, because if somebody's going to shoot in double coverage, I want Ja to shoot it. And Ja's getting roughly the same amount of shots. But at the same time, it's like, it's good to see the confidence in your shot from a young kid in Dillon Brooks. And the team would be different if Triple J was there, but the Lakers would take them. The Lakers would also take San Antonio, who is super interesting. Right now, DeMar is leading all scorers in the bubble in the fourth quarter. He's just super clutch, and it appears like basically the rest of the offense does the lifting through three quarters, and then they just turn to DeMar in the fourth, and he's fresher, and he's just like, go do DeMar things. Don't shoot any threes because you don't want to shoot any threes. There was a great one where he did a step back, or he caught the ball over in the corner wing and stepped up and got his foot right on the line. Like he did a little dribble to get in rhythm, to get himself a set shot, so to speak. But, took just enough of a step to turn it into DeMar's shot, which was an inefficient long two, fractionally like an inch or two short of being a three. It's like, damn it, DeMar. Just shoot the fucking three, for Christ's sakes. But the Lakers want anybody but Portland, is my guess. I don't know that for a fact. Perhaps they feel that they match up really well, but the fact of the matter is, me looking at it, Portland, okay, fine. The top end talent of the Lakers is better. Take LeBron over Dame, sure. Take AD over CJ, sure. And then after that, find me a Laker that you take over Nurkic or Carmelo. Or hell, Gary Trent Jr. up until the past two games, but Gary Trent Jr. has been playing really well. Danny Green has been very un-Danny Green-like. Just, he had a couple clutch threes in that last game, but it's been so bad that post-game, man, Lakers Twitter comes out, just pitchforks and torches to raid his house and burn him at the stake. And that's who you need. Kuzma is your third best option, and he has been shooting really well, but I know what I'm going to get from Carmelo. Kuzma is still, I need to see that in the playoffs, and there's less pressure on him, but they need him to be the third best on the team. And as LeBron put it, third best on the team, or if he's having a bad night or AD's having a bad night, the second best on the team. Or I guess hypothetically, in that case, if they're both having a bad night, he needs to step up and be the best player on the team. And I don't know if Kuzma can do that, whereas Melo was the number one option for the majority of his career. Up until his time at OKC and now Portland, it was the Melo show. And as much as you want to harangue Melo, nothing was born out of that. He never really traveled all that far in the playoffs outside of 1 year and early on in New York, and when he was a young kid in Denver before he forced himself into a trade. But I think that was more Carmelo forcing himself to the Knicks instead of just doing it in free agency, thereby making the Knicks send out all the assets they had to Denver. And now Carmelo cannot be surrounded with young, talented guys on cheaper contracts and then fill in with veterans to basically plug any kind of holes that these young kids couldn't do, just because Melo wanted to get that max money with the extra year from the Knicks. It was seemingly on the outside, as someone who is not Carmelo Anthony, it seemed purely motivated by getting all the money he possibly could and playing on the team that he wanted. Assets be damned, instead of just taking the one extra year in Denver instead of forcing yourself out and going to New York as a free agent. And they still would have had all those assets, and they could have made trades and made moves to acquire guys that are on the same timeline, that they would add sacrifice draft picks and, any kind of salary matching shit, as opposed to what they forced them to do. But that aside, I think Melo is a better option to me right now than Kuzma. And Nurkic is better than JaVale, is better than Dwight, is better than any other big besides AD that they're going to throw at him. I don't buy into Dion Waiters. J.R. Smith is not getting much run as of right now. It'll be advantageous for them to get Rondo back. But with no Avery Bradley, they needed that extra defense on the wing to help shut down other defenders. So the Lakers want anybody but, because I think they have a chance of sweeping or going 4-1 against any of those other teams except for Portland. And Portland, I could see them taking them to 7. So here is how the 8th seed, the race for the 8th seed is going to go. Portland controls their own fate. They play Brooklyn in this next game. If they win, they secure the 8th seed. Done. Now, if they lose, they need everybody else to lose, and they keep the 8th seed. All right? Now, here's where it gets super confusing. It's not really super confused, but you can find this at sports.yahoo.com, and it's breaking down the NBA playoff scenarios, and they've got it all laid out, right? So the remaining schedule is Memphis against Milwaukee. Milwaukee has no Giannis, but they were never really going to play him and Middleton and other guys. So Memphis needs to beat, Dante DiVincenzo and the second run guys, the second unit guys, in order to secure a win. And if Phoenix wins, they get the 9th seed, so long as Portland, wins. Portland loses, Memphis wins, Memphis bumps up, and they get the 8th seed. And then it becomes a whole context of, okay, so if Portland wants to maintain the 9th seed, if they lose, they need 2 of the following teams, Memphis, Phoenix, and San Antonio, to lose. So any of those 2 teams lose, Portland gets the 9th seed. If all those teams win, Portland now drops down and they're out of the playoffs if they lose their next game. Once again, they're playing Brooklyn. And they can't beat Brooklyn in this glorified G League team that Brooklyn is going to be rolling out, that they don't deserve to make it in anyway. So that's basically Portland dictates all terms in regards to their future. They are in the driver's seat. They win and they're in. They lose and 2 other teams lose, then they're in. Otherwise, adios muchacho. Now, if Memphis, like I said before, Memphis needs to win, and they secure their spot. If it's going to be Portland versus Memphis in that play-in game, then Portland needs to win, Memphis needs to win. If Phoenix wants to make it into the 9th seed, Memphis needs to lose, Phoenix needs to win. Now, the problem is if both Memphis and Phoenix win, Memphis has the tiebreaker. They went 3-1 against them, I believe, in the regular season this year. So Phoenix needs Memphis to lose, flat out. It's the only way Phoenix has any shot of making this in. And San Antonio has played fewer games, so they need everybody else to lose in order to jump in to this mix. So Phoenix needs Memphis to lose, and then they make it in if they win. And Phoenix plays Dallas. That's not good for them. Who knows what Dallas is going to be doing at that point, because they're going to be locked in at their current position. What sucks for them is they played more games, Dallas has, than anybody, and they have, in essence, just as many wins as the 4, 5, 6 teams. I think Houston has 1 more win, and Utah and OKC have the same number of wins, but by virtue of the fact that they played more games, they have more losses, so it drops them lower. They could end up hypothetically with more wins than the other teams, but because they'll ultimately have more losses, they're going to stay in the 7th seed. So do you play a lot of minutes for Doncic and Porzingis? I'm not entirely sure. Still, though, a tough game because my guess is Doncic and Porzingis will play some, and then San Antonio has Utah to close out. So Memphis, you win and you're in. Portland, you win and you're in. Phoenix, you need to win, and either Memphis loses or Portland loses. San Antonio can get in. They can keep, I wonder if this would count for playoffs, but this would keep their playoff hopes alive if Phoenix wins and Portland and Memphis lose. If that happens and San Antonio wins, San Antonio is now in the 9th seed. I mean, this is confusing as shit, but ultimately it comes down to San Antonio only has one route in, or 2 routes. If everybody above them loses and they win, they're in. And at that point, then Portland would be the 9th seed. Or no. Yeah, I'd have to look. I think they might maintain the 9th seed and Portland would stay at the 8th because they're a half game up, or anyway, either way. So the driver's seat in this are Portland and Memphis, and they both have games that are completely winnable. And Phoenix and San Antonio have harder games that could still win. Phoenix could go 8-0 in the bubble and get iced out of the playoffs. It's possible. It is possible. And it's kind of demoralizing for them. They did the unthinkable. They were a team that I and almost everybody else worth their salt felt like should not have been invited. Them and the Wizards, to me, when we started all this, like, this is ridiculous. Why are you inviting these 2 teams? They have no real shot. And now Phoenix could sneak in. And I hope they do. Memphis is not Memphis. If they had Triple J, then I'd be pulling for Memphis just because they proved it throughout the entire regular season. And to me, it's a little bit more deserving because of that. Because, they've managed to do this and they've been holding on to the 8th seed. They had the 8th seed coming into this and they looked legit. So I was pulling for Memphis, but now that they're out, I wouldn't mind seeing Phoenix. I got nothing against San Antonio, but it'd be nice to have some new blood in the playoff mix. And you've had a hell of a run, San Antonio. So I'm not rooting against you, but at the same time. Another comment from Daniel Suava. I'm a Knicks fan, so to see them decapitate the team and future for Carmelo still pisses me off to this day. Yeah, it should. It really should. In the moment watching it, it's like, why are you having them sacrifice? Did we learn nothing from previous history? I think New Orleans apparently learned nothing from watching what happened with LeBron and Cleveland the first time, because Cleveland had all these assets and kept sending them out to bring in average veterans, sacrificing draft picks and their future flexibility to bring in decent veterans to surround with LeBron, because it was this win now mentality when you should take a slower approach and try and draft young guys and build a young core around them, a la OKC before OKC was basically blown up. Because then you're it's a blueprint for domination of the league for a decade. And then New Orleans was doing it with Anthony Davis. It's not surprising that Davis wanted out of there, because ultimately it came to, okay, if I re-sign with you and I look at our long-term future and health of this organization, I don't see us winning a championship with our current asset structure and salary cap. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But so that race to the 8th, it's going to be, I can't wait. Tomorrow is going to be a hell of a day watching all these games unfold. Tomorrow, Thursday, and then Friday. Friday, I'll be doing another Dimes. Tentatively, I've got a guest lined up for that one, but in the future, I'll announce. Like next Wednesday, I've got Ellis coming on. But my guest on Friday is still trying to hammer down his schedule and free up the time to come on at noon. He wants to. And if he can't on this week, then we'll figure out another time, doing these twice a week. The other interesting thing that came out today is the rules for allowing family members and friends and whatnot into the bubble once the playoffs begin. So it'll be after the first round, into the second, you can start bringing in friends and family. And, so the way it's been detailed as of right now, the players will be allowed to bring in family and quote unquote established, long-standing personal friends into the bubble. Now, the guidelines on the guests starting after the first round of the playoffs per NBA sources are 4 guests per player that could be exceeded 4 children. So if you have 4 guests and you've got, 4 kids, well, the 4 kids don't count towards the 4 guests. And the guests can travel on team charters following testing, and guests will be allowed to attend games. Each player is allowed 1 ticket per playoff game for a guest, plus an additional admission for a child who is 32 inches and below. It's weird. I guess the Disney influence there. You can be this tall to watch this game. And then here who's not eligible, or any individual the player has not previously met in person or with whom the player has had limited in-person interactions. For example, known by the player only through social media or an intermediary. And among those not allowed as player guests are, quote unquote, current or prospective staff or business relationships, including agents, trainers, massage and physical therapists, personal chefs, tattoo artists. And as some people have pointed out, that does not exclude strippers. So Lou Will, who has a sandwich or something, some food item, I don't know, actually, I think they're wings, named after him at that strip club in Atlanta. Well, if he has a long-standing personal relationship with that stripper, perhaps he can pay to have her quarantined in there. And what I read earlier is the way that they're going to do this is they have to be tested off-site and then flown down on a team charter, and then they'll be sequestered for 14 days off of Disney campus, and then they can come on to the campus complex. Starting, the earliest date will be August 31st, so 19 days from now. And it's also, what if certain family members come down and they begin the quarantine process and their loved one doesn't make the second round? It's nice that they came down to support, but at the same time, you just wasted all that time. I hope you enjoyed the hotel at Disneyland, because that's the other restriction. If you come on to the NBA's campus, you are not allowed to go to the park. You are not allowed to leave. You don't have the freedom of movement because you're going to be interacting with players, and those players interact with other players and whatnot. You need to be on lockdown just like everybody else. You'll be going under the same protocols, living under the same protocols. You'll be asked to, or forced to rather, required to, I guess would be the more accurate, wear masks everywhere. You can't Dwight Howard this and just take it off and say that you don't believe in vaccines and this is all a sham and they're trying to control us and put tracking chips in us and all that shit. And as numerous people have pointed out, we've already opted into that program by having cell phones. So if we want to be tracked or eavesdropped, or have someone eavesdrop on us, or videotape us or take our picture, they can do that whenever they wanted to. They just need to tap into our phone. And so we're being tracked already. Big Brother is watching at all times. So much so that the other day, my wife and I had an offhanded conversation about an oat milk that she brought home because it was an extra that her sister had, and said, hey, give it a whirl because I have smoothies in the morning and I just switched to oat milk to just mix things up. And the next day I had ads all over everything when I logged on for that very specific brand of milk. And I only uttered the name of it once. When I grabbed it, she handed it to me and I was like, oh, such and such. So Big Brother is watching and listening at all times, as disconcerting as that is. It's not going to stop. So Dwight Howard, your fear of being followed and tagged and tracked and all the other conspiracy theories via a vaccine, it's already happened. So the families will be let in. I'll be curious as to whether or not if they open up even more people allowed in. So like maybe that one person plus one child type of thing in the second round. But in the third round, maybe they let in two people and two kids, and just to kind of create some sort of atmosphere overall. Although I don't want it to interfere with the bubble environment in regards to the games that we're experiencing now. It's pretty fantastic to watch. And there's all kinds of subtle advantages now that teams didn't have in the past, which I brought up on other shows, like Brad Stevens talking about how Chris Paul was so loud and boisterous that he was dictating the mentality and the overall feeling of the game itself just by force of his voice and will. And that's super interesting. Does that give finally Chris Paul the type of advantage, and then do bringing in family members and whatnot stop him or inhibit any of these players from expressing themselves in any kind of way? But I do love the incorporation of the Friedson family. I think the best to date so far was, I believe it was last night on the introductions for the Phoenix Suns. And on the starting intros, they had a video package, and it was friends and family of all the various starters. So it starts with like DeAndre Ayton and it ends with Devin Booker, but doing their intros. And some of them are just a single individual. DeAndre Ayton, it was a little girl. Mikal Bridges, it was a woman. Ricky Rubio, it had 3 different sets of individuals. And the final one looked like potentially his dad and maybe his nephew or his son or something like that closing out. But it was a nice little touch. You could see it move the players, and it was a great incorporation of those that they're missing by sequestering themselves down in Orlando to close out this season, to protect the NBA salary structure and CBA as a whole, but also to entertain us, those starved for it, sitting at home. And, you don't want to hear a player bellyache about how hard this is, because you're still making a tremendous salary. You're living in a very nice hotel, much as Rondo may have bitched and said, we called it a Motel 8 when he first got in there. Looked as nice as damn near any hotel I've ever stayed in. All your meals are taken care of. You have health screenings every day. You have access to the best medical technology in the world. You know what is going to be super interesting about this that I was thinking about last night watching that Suns game is Rubio has a tan. And I don't know if any non-white person out there has ever thought about this, but late in the playoffs, when it's in the middle of the summer, you can always, there's a great little thing within the NBA players have not been able to go out in the sun and enjoy themselves. So most of the white guys are pasty as fuck in July, just white as can be, where the rest of us watching have a nice tan. I remember watching, one of the Bulls Jazz, I think it was the final one, the 6th championship, and I was on vacation with my parents, and I had sunburn and sitting there, and I'm watching a pasty Kerr and a pasty Judd Butler. But Rubio's got a nice tan because these guys have off. Like if you listen to the JJ Redick podcast, he's like, you have a tremendous amount of time off during the day that it's not now filled with, playing with your kids or doing all the mundane things that you have in your day-to-day life. Now it's like I go read or I go fishing or I go play golf, and I'm out. Now these guys are out in the sun because they have the time off. And we're going to see white guys with tans in the playoffs. I don't know if that's ever happened in my entire life as an NBA basketball player. It's going to be kind of weird to see because I'm just used to the pastiness. That to me is a playoff basketball. But it's an anomalous and unique situation. And like I said, you don't want to hear the players complain about it, but they are sacrificing. They are away from family, their kids. Some are going to leave for the birth of their children. Like Gordon Hayward has already said that his I believe it's son is what he announced is due in September. And if they're still playing in September, he's leaving. And man, if you are legitimately, what if you are in the championship hunt? Because if you leave, you have to get tested every day when you leave, and then you come back, you're quarantined for, I believe it's 4 days. And that amount of time, even if you only leave for one day, that's 5 days out. So that's going to be 2 games that you're going to miss pretty much guaranteed, unless it happens a timeout where you sweep and your next round opponent goes to 7 games. So you get a couple extra days, and hypothetically, maybe you only miss one game or just the practice in between. That would be the best case scenario, and fully understand why Gordon Hayward would do it. But me, if I was a Celtics fan, kind of watching him be like, you're going to see your kid in 3 weeks. I realize this is difficult and you don't want to tell them that, but damn it, you're already doing all of this. Why wouldn't you just take the extra 3 weeks? It's not going to make any difference to the child, but that's selfish as shit. Yeah, I don't know how you combat that. You would hope, as a Celtics fan, that his wife would just go, you need to stay. You've put in too much work coming back from injuries. You want to prove all the people wrong. You need to stay. But what if, like, there's a death in the family? I mean, hell, the Clippers have been ravaged by that. Pat Beverly lost a close friend, a guy that lived with him and his family when he was in high school, I believe. Just 2.5, 3 weeks ago, was shot. Montrezl Harrell's grandmother passed away, and Lou Williams lost a man that's been credited as his mentor. And that happened before the bubble began, but that's real life. And someone dies like that, to me, seems unavoidable to leave and go to pay your final respects to an individual that may have meant the entire world to you. But how do you, the push and pull there, that's got to be insanely difficult. I don't know. This entire context and situation is distinctly unique, but it's also made for a wildly engaging product for those just watching and have no stakes in the games outside of wanting to be engaged with NBA basketball again, just like those watching and listening to this. I mean, shit, I am talking by myself in my house. Wrote notes out for this. I have a page and a half of notes of all kinds of different things I want to discuss. And I do that for almost every show. It's an excuse to go deep dive and go into Basketball Reference and go through the stats functionality of NBA.com and go to 3, 4, 5 other websites that I thoroughly enjoy, and plus I listen to anyway. But I'm sitting in my house alone, just talking basketball into the void. I can see by the count on the stream that some of you are watching along with. Perhaps you're doing chores around the house, whatnot, and or at work. No idea, but you just want to talk basketball too. So the situation has been riveting for me. I watch minimum a game and a half to 2 games a day. Some of it is on in the background as I'm trying to do other things, but I don't do those things all that well successfully. But there have been days where I do nothing else other than watch basketball because I lined up my schedule and I've cleared it entirely. And I just put the work on the next day and the previous day because the matchups are just so good, especially those first 2 days. I didn't do shit else on the 30th and 31st. I watched basketball for the 30th, there was no entire day, but I watched those 2 games and then the next day's full slate of games. So I understand the push and pull, and I understand how difficult it can be for these athletes, but they're putting on a show for us. They are trying hard. I mean, this is March Madness mixed with basketball camp, the likes of which we're never going to see again. Even if they do a modified bubble for next season, which they're talking about doing, they're talking about doing in that I've seen proposals and read proposals that have been floated of having a few centralized cities and teams stay there for a while, and then they kind of fly out and go to another centralized location type of thing. Like Los Angeles would be one because we have the courts for it and we have the hotels, and a bunch of players have homes here anyway. But it's going to be difficult. I don't know how the NFL actually pulls this off, given the roster sizes of those teams and the fact that now Jerry Jones is saying that he is determined to play games in front of fans in Cowboy Stadium. It's like, dude, fuck off, man. You're going to fill that massive cavernous stadium with people. Oh, so I don't know how the NFL does it, and I'm not sure how the NBA does it next season without some sort of modified bubble type situation. They'll try. They're going to push, but the vaccine's not going to be ready. They would tell you this: the pharmaceutical company that is running out, is it Pfizer, that's running out the first 100 million? I'm guessing the NBA and every other sports league is going to get quite a few of those. Got another comment from Eric Ritz before we close out here. It says, I watch a minimum a game to a game and a half every week. And a little emoji rather of the grimacing face. But he only watches the Bucks. We got some Bucks fans on the stream today. More than one. It's you and Eric. Oh, no, that's the same. Eric Ritz. I apologize, Eric. Eric, I work from home. So, especially right now, I don't have a day job. I haven't had a day job since I was my mid 20s, thankfully, between comedy and podcasting and doing some commercial work, which, by the way, if you wanted to get into commercial work, you do not need to be a good actor at all. I got told that by guys that book, and they're like, you think you could be good in front of a camera? Because I was a comedian and they were comedians, and I was like, man, I think so. And they're like, yeah, so do I. So that's all you need. You don't need to be a good actor. And trust me, you don't. Nobody is Day-Lewising on the set of a commercial. You're just not. So thankfully, my schedule is a little bit more open, and I am able to watch more basketball. I'm lucky. I'm fortunate in that regard, and I'm thankful for it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man. These next couple of days to watch how everything pans out with the 8th seed. I mean, if Portland and Memphis lose, they got the 2 gimme games. And Phoenix and San Antonio win. It just upends the entire idea of what everybody assumed coming into this ends up being. It'll be crazy. Like it's entirely possible. Did anybody in their right mind see Portland rattling off 7 straight wins, their longest win streak since the 2009-2010 season? Fucking 10 years ago. It's been a decade since they won this many games straight. Nobody saw that coming. I mean, they started the season and they were 6-3 at one point, and everybody was like, oh, Phoenix. And then they became Phoenix again, and they did exactly what we thought. It's what the Phoenix does. And then now to see this, it's like it's been mind-blowing. And the Spurs just holding on, man. Can they keep their active playoff streak alive? Who knows? Portland wanting to prove that last year was not a fluke, making the conference finals, that they're a legit team, that Dame is a premier superstar in this league. And I love the eruption on Twitter last night of Steph. You know what? I take Dame over Steph now. And you're like, all right, let's not go too far here. Dame has had some impressive last-second shots in the playoffs, and the guy's a cold-blooded killer. But to say that he's better than Steph, I'm sorry. That's a bridge too far. Now, people saying he's better than Kyrie, all right, there's a discussion that I think is legitimate and worth having as to who you think is better. But I think Steph lords above both. Steph is the best shooter, pure shooter I've seen, flat out. I've been watching basketball pretty consistently now for 33, 34, maybe 35 years. And I don't remember anybody remotely like Steph. There are guys who can get hot. There were great shooters, but nobody that changed. I mean, he changed the game flat out. Think about it now. There would be no Houston if there wasn't a Steph. There would be no teams routinely shooting 40, 50 threes in a night if there was no Steph. Dame would not be allowed to pull up from half court and no one bats an eye. Booker now does it and no one bats an eye. PG. There's that one where he's, is that in OKC or is that I think it's in Indiana, where he does a little arm push, like he kind of tells his team to settle down a little bit, and then the defender takes an extra step back and backs off, and he's damn near at half court, and he launches a three. This was 10 years ago. His coach, the announcers, the fan base, even if he made it, would have been crying foul, saying that's a terrible shot, don't ever shoot that again. And now we're so accustomed to the ability of these guys to launch from long range that you don't even bat an eye at it. So Steph has changed the game. And if he got the volume of shots that Harden did, that's what my hope for this year was. With Clay being out, they're going to need him to step up. So he is going to have to take on the lion's share of the shooting from that. So he's going to get the volume numbers that Harden does. And will his efficiency actually hold through? And now we can have an argument or a discussion between, because a lot of Harden fans say, well, he's asked to do so much more. It's like, okay, well, now Steph this year has been asked to do that. And let's see what, if his efficiency on those shooting numbers end up staying roughly the same, because then it's a qualitatively, he is a better shooter and, more advantageous to have if you want to be a championship team. But we didn't get to have that discussion. And I think that is the discussion for today. I'm looking forward to, the next few days games. And thank you to everybody that jumped in. Look, we're a small little channel, and it's an excuse legitimately for me to watch more basketball. That's it. I just contrived a way to watch more basketball. I did it at Collider. We were doing sports time. There was a discussion. Eventually, I just said, hey, I'd like to do a basketball show, because then it just creates the excuse for me to watch even more basketball than I already do. And Mark was like, yeah, go for it. And boom, got to do a show. And trying to free up the schedule to have Mark on. And right now he's a little too busy with everything that's going on, them trying to juggle everything over there, but he wants to come on. So we will find a week for that to happen. 2 shows a week. Fernandez will be on. There is no bad blood between us. I just came to the realization that I'm the only sports show here, and people tune into this channel for a movie and TV talk, not for sports. And those of you that found me there, I love it. It's awesome that the Venn diagram overlaps, but the overlap wasn't so huge as to justify to me staying there. So might as well just do this on my own. Plus, I get to dictate the schedule, and that to me is, ultimately the best. Even though I've said it at noon on Wednesdays and Fridays, making the decision and knowing, and as opposed to having to schedule the specific studio time, it works better for me. But who cares? That's neither here nor there. But we're working together, trying to figure out his schedule, and hopefully I've got that guest by Friday. Once again, I don't want to say the name, because I'll have them on in the future. Just need to work out schedules. But it's also nice to see that my friends are busy, that they're not now, after all these months, just stuck at home. Like, projects are picking back up for them, and they're able to get out and work again to some degree. So that's good. It hurts this show getting fans on, or getting guests on a little bit, but so be it. So that's it this week for Dropping Dimes. If you want to leave a comment below on YouTube, that's awesome. I will make a habit of reading those and trying to respond to every show. And if you'd like to subscribe, great. If not, you just want to tune in and listen every once again, so be it. I'm happy to have you here for the conversation. If you're listening, thank you so much. If you want to leave a rating wherever you listen, that'd be awesome. If you don't want to, don't sweat it. If you want to subscribe, once again, great, wherever you're listening. If you don't sweat it. I'm just here to have fun, just to talk NBA, and I'm thankful for anybody that wants to come with and have that discussion with me. That's it for this week, for today's episode of Dropping Dimes. I'll see you guys on Friday at noon Pacific Standard Time. And until then, let's just enjoy the hell out of these next few days games. Basketball, rather. Can't even speak. That's it. Adios. I'm Matt Knost. See you Friday.